Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Horrifying upright canine Dogman encounter near Navajo reservation, Arizona. While on vacation in Arizona in 2013, I was visiting family who live on the edge of the Navajo Nation. The town they live in is basically on the border of the reservations and such things. The family in question is my mother's brother and sister. They live together with their spouses in a modest home, but the home is unimportant. I went there during my childhood every now and then, and had several Navajo friends, so after a night out catching up with my two old friends, whose names I will not mention because of the events that took place that night, I was driving the two of them home. The female friend, we will call her Sue, was fast asleep in the right side of the back seat, while the male friend, whom shall be called Jim, was wide awake in the left side of the back seat. As we're on the way to Jim's house, I see something on the side of the road that is briefly illuminated by my headlights. It looks like a large coyote walking down the side of the road on all fours. Jim saw it first and pointed it out to me, so I slowed down and turned my brights on. What we both saw disturbed us so deeply that we had to wake Sue up to see if she would confirm that we were not crazy. When Sue woke up and looked out of the window, I had stopped the car at this point. She froze in her place, and the thing, which had been walking along at a leisurely pace until now, turned around and stood up on its hind legs. It did not look like a dog does when it stands on its legs. It looked like it was used to doing it. Before Sue could shake herself out of the soul-crushing fear she was in, Jim and I got a good look at it. It was everything the stereotypical definition of a werewolf was, with a few key differences. We saw its snout was less like a wolf's, and more like a hybrid between a wolf and a human. Rounded with a dog's nose slightly protruding out and sharp teeth, and its hands and feet both had claws on them which were seemingly permanently extended. That or it was extremely hostile at the moment it saw us, or rather, her. By the time we were done gawking at the thing and fear started to take over curiosity, Sue snapped out of her own fear long enough to scream at me to drive as fast I could. She refused to stop screaming until it was completely out of sight, and when we pulled over and she calmed down enough to regain coherency, we asked her what was going on. She explained that she could not tell us why, but she knew what that thing was, and that it wanted nothing but to hurt her and anyone related to her. When I dropped her off at her house, I, and Jim as well, felt obligated to walk with her to her door. We asked if she was going to be okay, and she said she would tell her dad he was back, and he would protect her like he always did. We just looked at her with concerned looks on our faces and walked back to the car. On the way to Jim's house we saw it again, but it was heading the opposite direction, to Sue's house. We thought it was either another one or the same one which had either gotten lost or visited someone else, and was now going to Sue. Deciding that it was our duty as friends to Sue to try and protect her from whatever this thing was, we turned around. But when we did so, the creature reared up once again and looked at us. Then something I will never forget happened. It let loose a deep guttural roar directed at us. A roar so bestial in nature that it shook us both to our cores. Apparently, we were not the only ones that were shaking, as my car's radio died and the engine shut off. I screamed at the top of my lungs, accompanied by Jim, and fumbled to turn it back on. By the time the creature was halfway to our car, it was walking into the road towards us. I got it back on in time to floor it out of there as fast as possible. When I finally got slowed down enough to not break every speed limit in America, I realized I had passed Jim's house about 3 miles back. I didn't see the creature again that night, although I drove by Sue's house again, and everything seemed fine. No broken windows or signs of forced entry, and I haven't seen anything like it since. I don't know what to call it other than a skinwalker or dogman or both, but whatever it was hostile, and it plagued either the local community or one of my friends specifically. I have kept in touch with both Jim and Sue. She refuses to talk about it, and will only say, things are fine, when I ask about it. Jim can't get anything out of her either. I'm afraid for her. I'm afraid for everyone in that area. Nelson.
Large upright coyote Dogman, Southeastern Oklahoma. I want to report disturbing activity around my residence during the past 2 weeks. I hope you can give me an idea of what we're dealing with. I live in a rural area of southeastern Oklahoma, a few miles from Tulsa. I've lived here all of my 48 years and have never experienced anything weird around here before. On June 1st about 10:30 p.m. I was on my back porch reading the newspaper. My husband was getting ready to leave for work. My porch faces a large wooded area, about 800 feet or so from the lake. I have a small yard and the edge of the woods is about 50 feet from the house. My husband was walking out the back door, said goodbye and walked to his truck. As soon as he pulled away, I heard a low shrill sound coming from the direction of the lake. It reminded me of pigs squealing, but was much louder and scarier. I didn't get up from my chair as I looked towards the woods. After a few minutes, I heard something heavy walking through the woods. I was definitely something or someone walking on two legs. It was so dark, I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, 3 deer burst out of the woods and ran alongside the house. I thought that they caused the noise, so I got up and walked into the house. Most nights, after I come home from work around 8:30 p.m., I eat dinner, then go out on the porch and read the newspaper. Ever since that first night, I heard the same shrill sound on 4 other occasions. My husband sat with me a few times, and he was surprised by the sounds. He has been a hunter all his adult life, but didn't have an idea what made those sounds. This Tuesday night, I was sitting on the porch talking to my daughter by phone. My husband was working that night. It was about 10:45 p.m. I had a strange feeling most of the evening and kept my eyes focused towards the woods. I was about ready to get up and walk into the house after ending the call, but then I noticed a pair of bright yellow eyes looking at me from the woods. It was only a few feet into the brush, and the eyes were at least 7 feet from the ground. I ran into the kitchen and quickly closed the door and locked it. I turned the lights off inside, but the porch light was still on, and the edge of the woods was slightly illuminated. As I peeked out of the window above the sink, I noticed a tall, huge dark figure standing in the back of the yard. The eyes still shone brightly and were looking in my direction. As I continued to watch, my eyes were adjusting to the low light. I then noticed the long thick arms with fingers and long nails. I then recognized the long snout and long pointed ears. Then suddenly, it turned and ran into the woods. It was gone. I was literally trembling, because I had no idea what I just saw. I called my daughter back and told her. My son-in-law and her immediately came over and spent that night. He brought his rifle with him. The next morning, I told my husband what I saw. He is part Osage and believes in animal spirits, but he was confused by this thing I described. He told me that it may be a trickster spirit, and if we ignore it, it won't bother us. I'm not so sure I believe that. This didn't look like a spirit and literally resembled a huge dark coyote walking on 2 legs, a dogman. Have you heard of anything like this? Please contact me. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Patty.
Cryptid canine dogman encounters in Appalachia. When I was in the 7th grade in eastern Tennessee, I was outside with my dog laying on a dirt mound looking at the clouds to pass the time. This was around 5:30 p.m. when my dog started barking and pulling at the leash. We lived in the countryside, so we have woods surrounding one half of our house. I tried hushing my beagle, but she persisted. I then stood up and looked the direction she was looking to say, "Look, there isn't anything there." As I said that, a large black creature with a canid body sprinted out of the woods. This creature had thin fur that was so black it had a pearlescent hue, with almost a purple tint. The eyes were a mid-shade of yellow. Its legs were crooked backwards, and its hands were long and slender. It stood about 7 feet tall when standing on its hind legs. When it dropped to all 4, its back had an aggressive hunch and still maintained its fluid motion. Every step seemed pre-calculated. As it was sprinting, it tilted its head towards me as if it was aware of me, but could not be bothered by my being there. It then jumped over a 4-foot cattle fence without much difficulty. I'm a senior in high school now, and just last summer I had another experience. I worked with my father in his shed. He worked on motors and stuff and had left my phone in there. My friend was staying the night, so we headed back down to the shed when I realized I had left my phone there. It was about 10 o'clock, and it was pitch black and about the same time of year as my previous encounter. We were standing outside the front of the shed trying to get the key into the keyhole when we heard a rustling in the brush in the woods. It was a very faint and sounded like that of the breeze on leaves. Both my friend and I heard it, so we turned the flashlights towards the brush, only to see a pitch black shape standing in the light brush. The yellow eyes destroy my mind every time I recall the moment. My friend says, "You see that, right?" By this time I was already sprinting towards the house. Seeing this creature and knowing how it was just watching us tore my mind apart. It was so silent. I had a mental breakdown as soon as I got in the house. I've never had such an intense reaction to anything. From then on, every time I went into the woods I felt like something was watching me. I know this sounds crazy, and I get that. I struggle with telling anyone, and this is the first time I've ever tried to reach out in search of similar experiences. David.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.